Now that was some entertaining Sunday afternoon hockey. Toronto Sceptres win 2-0 against the Seattle Torrent in Toronto in regulation. What an important win it was for the Sceptres. In a game that I think might have been a bit trickier than they thought it was going to be. Seattle obviously is a bit beaten up right now. They are last place in the standings, and they're missing Hillary Knight, who's been out since the Olympics. They're missing Grant Mentis, who got knocked out of last game, if I'm not mistaken. And they're missing Hannah Bilka, who's been out for a couple of games now too. They're hurting in Seattle. I feel bad for them, to be honest. Toronto, this game was without Daryl Watts, and I think the absence of Watts in the games that Toronto's had to play without her this year, the structure that they play and the difference you can see is really interesting to me. But getting in the game from the drop of the puck, really close, really solid game, pretty back and forth, good chances both ways. 4 minutes in, Toronto manages to get the puck out of the defending zone. Pass comes up to Blair Turnbull from Dalton, get a little bit of a 2-on-1 going. Turnbull's storming down the far wing, looks off the pass, takes the shot, and Murphy almost gets this one. It really just squeaks. Turnbull goes low left pad on Murphy, and it looks like she gets it, but it just kind of, a little bit of the momentum keeps it trickling underneath of her, and it just slides over the line. Just barely, but enough to count. And 4 minutes in, Toronto has a 1-0 lead, and Turnbull has the start of what would be an absolutely incredible night for the captain of the Sceptres. The rest of the period, it was tight. Brooke Bryant took a penalty for elbowing, which isn't something you see called all that often. But Toronto, with all of the power play woes that they have had, and they still didn't score on any opportunities they got tonight, but it actually looked like a power play. Seattle was blocking a whole bunch of stuff today. I gotta say, like the passes they were getting in the way of, the shots they were putting themselves in front of, was really impressive by Seattle. Their defensive game was really good, but Toronto was actually able to keep possession. They were able to get a couple of shots off, and even if the puck was cleared out by Seattle, they were able to break back in and establish a presence in the zone again. When their power play has looked so messy and sloppy and disorganized and all over the place at so many different points this season, having a bit more stability when they're on the woman advantage was really nice to see. And it's where, you know what, if you don't score, you're not going to score in every power play. I completely understand that. That's fine. They have one of the worst power plays in the league. That's not fine. But the fact that it actually looked like they were making use of the advantage they got, and the fact that they were actually applying pressure to the Torrent when they had an advantage was really refreshing, and it gives me a lot of hope. With Watts being out of the lineup, Turnbull was put on the line with Comfort and Dalton. A bunch of the rest of the lineup got shaken up a little bit. But that's the big change with Watts' absence. And that line looked great, man. I think that it wound up funneling more for Turnbull than to be the primary offensive point of that line instead of Watts. So a lot of passes were getting funneled into her. Comfort and Dalton are such incredible playmakers, especially Dalton. Just absolutely fantastic playmakers, and Turnbull is always in the right spot, and she just had some great bloody chances on the power play and on the first line. She looked incredible tonight. But the first period ends 1-0. Second period, pretty good, I'm gonna say, first half of the second period, and this is where Toronto, a lot of the time, it's usually I had thought because they had garnered a bit more of a lead by the time they reached the halfway point. No. Right around the halfway point, maybe a little bit afterward of the second period, Toronto just could not get the puck out of their own zone. They were hemmed in for so long. And this is where I want to take an opportunity to talk about Claire DeGeorge. Because Claire DeGeorge has been the 13th forward or scratched for most or all of this season so far. Most games she doesn't get any ice time, or she gets like 2 shifts, maybe. She doesn't get a lot of play. But with Watts out, and them not signing anyone to fill the spot to any 10-day agreements or anything, DeGeorge just got bumped up to the 4th line, and her defensive zone looked really good. She seems to be getting in the way of a lot of stuff. She seemed to be putting pressure on Seattle and having to make them make quicker decisions and not really letting their formation stay established, forcing them to kind of keep trying to find new ways and new areas to maintain possession. And I was really impressed with DeGeorge in that regard. I will say that seems to be her specialty because Claire, you gotta shoot sometimes, girl. She had at least 3 chances. I think 1 per period, give or take, ish, where she had golden opportunities to shoot the puck and she passed it off instead. Like, you gotta have a little bit of selfishness, DeGeorge. You gotta have a little bit of selfishness. When you're given the golden opportunities that you were, there was one where she got past the puck right up into the high slot, no one really on her, a bit of traffic in front, like a flash screen, and she passed it off to Gentry, and I think Gentry didn't really know what to do with it because she wasn't expecting to get it. And there was another point in the second period where DeGeorge was on a 3-on-2, and she passed it off again when she got the puck when she was just in a little too tight, and I think Torrent was kind of catching up to them at that point. Their window was closing for when they were going to be able to get the shot off, and she just needed to try to put that one in the net, and she tried to pass it off instead. I understand that's going to happen sometimes. I understand some players are just like that. Some players are pass-first players. But DeGeorge, you gotta shoot those. You gotta shoot those, girl. But I was really impressed with her defensive zone when Toronto was hemmed in for so long, and Seattle was just relentless with the pressure they were having, and of course, the second period, with the long change, it's even harder for them to be able to get out of the zone. And Reagan Kirk, have a bloody night. She shouldn't have to pay for a meal until the end of the season. She kept them in this one. Holy cow. She was so good. Very end of the second period, like 40 seconds left in the period, you have your government mandated Renata Fast penalty. In the third, Toronto able to get a bit of pressure again. Seattle definitely is putting their foot a bit more on the gas, but Toronto isn't completely hemmed into their own zone. They're not completely trapped, and their defensive zone, when especially early in the season, their defensive zone looked so messy. They looked really tidy, even last game against Minnesota, when they were giving a lot of time and space to some of the Frost players and some of the opportunities that they had. Compared to that, too, tonight, they really weren't giving the Torn a whole lot of time to work with. They had a lot of overall zone time, and they were getting a lot of shots and stuff, but they had to keep it constantly cycling. They weren't really allowed to spend too much time just hanging on to it and looking and thinking and stick handling, and like they had to make quick decisions, which if a team is going to be trapping you in the defensive zone, you at least want to make sure they're doing that. You want to make sure that any chance they're going to get isn't necessarily going to be a great one. I also want to say Murphy for Seattle was great this game. She played so well. She's been so good for the Torrent all season. I kind of wish they started Jackson just because that's, former Sceptre, and CJ is so beloved in Toronto. That's the thing, is this game was actually Seattle's first game playing in Toronto, because the last home game Toronto had against Seattle was in Hamilton. It was a takeover tour game. So Toronto's played 2 in Seattle, but Seattle hasn't actually been in Toronto properly. And it was nice to see some of the players that got taken in the expansion draft. They did the little video tribute, and, they waved to the crowd and everything, and it was very nice. But yeah, Murphy just played so good. Seattle was in that last probably 5 minutes, they were really getting a good bit of pressure. Pull Murphy out, and a shot gets rung off the post. Comfort goes for an empty net and she misses, and it's icing, and it gets called back, and then she shoots it again and she misses. But Chalmerson's able to beat out the icing, and she puts the puck in the empty net to solidify a 2-0 win for the Sceptres. I loved the individual efforts that we were seeing, and the way you saw some of the players step up to fill the shoes that needed to be filled in Watts' absence. I think Toronto knows this is a game they should and need to win. Like, when you're against the last place team that's already super injured. And then in the third period, when Kayla Barnes went down from a hit, I didn't see specifically what happened with that hit, but she was down the ice and stayed on the ice for a long time. So it seemed like she came off the bench with the rest of the team at the end of the game, so I hope she's okay. But you never like to see someone go down and stay down for as long as she did, especially when the team is already so injured. But you saw Turnbull step up. You saw Dalton step up. You saw DeGeorge make good use of her play. You saw Zanin had a really good game. Comfer had an amazing game. Spooner had a couple of really good chances. Connors played incredibly well. Gentry was actually noticeable again. I think Gentry kind of fell off a little bit in the middle of the season, but she was good, and it was really nice to see the players almost in a way like really find a rhythm there. Everyone has to dig in and get that little extra bit out of themselves to fill in those holes. It was a great game from everybody. I think everyone did really well. All the players really found their specialties. I want to bring up DeGeorge again. Her defensive zone was great. Her offense and her, I don't know if it's confidence or if she's just a playmaking kind of pass first player, but when she was in the defensive zone as a defensive forward, she seemed great there. She was in her zone with that one, literally. Kirk had a fantastic game. Just an absolutely fantastic game. I don't know if she's had a shutout this season. This might be her first one. We're in the back third of the season, so we need to start paying attention to the standings a bit closer. Toronto still played more games than anyone else, though the gap has closed a bit. They're in 5th place. They're tied in points for 4th, but they've played more games, so they're in 5th. But if they can string a couple wins together, that's all we need them to do, right? That's all we as fans have been asking for, is just string a couple wins together. Because the gap might seem big. It's 3 points for a regulation win. They can get back into the race, no problem. They're right there. They're right there. When you see the team, and this is the team we want to see, this is what we know they're capable of. They need to finish. They definitely need to finish. Even though it was only 1-0 for like 90% of the game, it didn't really play like it. Like, Toronto had such good chances. Blair Turnbull alone, I mentioned, had so many good chances. There was, a couple where she just kind of fanned on a shot. There were a couple where Murphy made a great save. There was a couple where she threw it like just a hair wide. She had brilliant opportunities, and that's just Turnbull. The plays that they're able to make and the pressure they're able to apply are things we can see the team can do and is capable of. Do you want them to be able to escape their defensive zone when they're getting really hemmed in? Obviously, yes. Those second periods with the long change is something that's been plaguing them the entire season. They have needed to work on that since game 1. But some of the pieces have fallen into place here, and we just want to make sure we don't blow it all up again by the next game. That's all we want to see. That's all us as fans want to see. is keep the good parts. You have the good parts. You have the positives are figured out for the most part. Just take care of the negatives now. And we don't want you to take care of the negatives and all of a sudden the positives you have are all gone. Like, keep it all. Keep it all together. They need to finish. That's the big thing. That's the big thing for Toronto this season is they have so few goals for. They have, like, I think they're tied with the least multi-goal wins, or were going into this game in the season. I've said the most goals they've scored on a goalie is 4, and I think they've only done it twice. They just got to finish. They just got to finish. There's so many positives to look at to this game and so much to take away from it and so many strengths from individual players you can see that might help the coaching staff utilize them better in the future going forward to play more to those strengths that the individual players have. It's looking good, and I'm so reluctant to say that because last time I said it was looking good, their next game was abysmal. But I have hope. They're keeping me engaged. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Click like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want more. This has been so much fun. What a game. Just gotta finish a little more often.